Well, welcome. Thank you for joining us for these City Council candidate interviews. Would you introduce yourself and what ward you are representing?
Sure. My name is Rob Kleiner. I'm from Ward 2, running for City Council. I currently work at Northeast Delta Dental as their operations director.
Now, where do you live in Concord?
Ward 2, I'm in Pennacook, 03303, and I'm in Sandwood Crossing in that development up there behind 30 Pines.
How long have you been living in Concord?
Concord, I've been 45 years, my entire life. My first 6 months I was in Nashua, but I didn't really have much say in that.
You're not a native then.
Yeah, no,
I asked this question about my own kids. I had a son that was born in CMC, but we lived in Concord. I said, is my son Chris a native? Nope.
But yeah, then in Pennacook, I've been in Pennacook for 20 years, and Ward 2 for about 15.
Excellent, excellent. So you basically raised in Concord?
Yes, correct,
Great.
Yep. Parents still live in the same house I grew up in.
Now, are you involved in other civic activities in the community?
Yeah, I'm involved with a few nonprofit boards. I'm on the board of directors at Kimball Jenkins, Concord Coalition to End Homelessness, the Red River Theater. I'm also on the advisory committee at NHTI, and I'm also on the Parks and Recs committee for the city.
Okay. Well, we'll jump into the questions right off the bat then. We're going to start off talking about tax base and particularly tax base growth. We are a city that is maybe 28% of our land is tax exempt, and you know, every year costs go up. So how do we deal with that? So what ideas do you have that about expanding Concord's tax base so that we can kind of minimize the burden that all of us taxpayers have to face every year?
Certainly, expanding the tax base is extremely important. I think what happened out on Exit 17 is a fantastic example of what we can do to help bring in businesses into Concord, you know, using the TIF districts. That was a fantastic idea, as well as supporting other local businesses that are here downtown and across the city. It is a long-term play, right? To expand the tax base, it's not something that you can say, we're going to start acting today and have it done by tomorrow. It's a long-term goal that we have to work towards, and it's something we have to work towards each day. And that's working on things like infrastructure. Up at the mall, you know, we have the mall development going on, that the infrastructure for the sewer needs to be updated. That's going to be a large expenditure. That's there to support the businesses that are there, and then also future development. So that's something that we need to make sure that we're doing, investing in infrastructure so that the businesses will come to expand our tax base. We also need to make sure that we're looking at education, working with partners like NHTI to make sure that our workforce is educated for the business opportunities that might be coming in. If we're looking at high tech or something like that, we need to make sure that we have the workforce available to fill those roles. So working with our education would be fantastic. We also need to look at diversification of our businesses. So really take a study of what do we have in Concord already? What can we meet tomorrow? Because we don't want to just have one type of business in Concord, whether, you know, if it's all computers and computers are no more tomorrow, or if it's only one type of industry and that industry ends, we're in a position where we lose a lot of jobs. So we need to make sure that we diversify that. We also need to look at business retention to make sure that the tax base that we have here stays here. In the past few years, the top 10 businesses or top 10 employers have sort of changed and shuffled around, and those, if we can sort of retain those businesses, it's a lot easier to retain and help them grow than it is to bring in a totally new development. So we need to make sure that we're looking at retention. And then just also public and private partnerships, making sure that we're engaging the businesses, meeting with the businesses, having community listening events to make sure that voices are being heard so that we can work together.
So we've got some pretty talented people on city staff when it comes to economic development. Not too long ago, we had an economic development director, and you had mentioned, you know, retention issues and things of that nature. That requires someone paying attention on an ongoing basis and really focusing in on that type of work. Do you think the city should invest in someone who is dedicated to, like an economic development director, or do you think there are other ways to deal with this?
I think there are other ways as well as looking at an economic developer. I think both aspects can work well. I think community surveys can work well to help highlight where those where those holes are. But we need someone to do those surveys, right? So that would be a position that could certainly do that.
Well, Rob, one of the things that you mentioned while we were talking about economic development was housing is one of the issues. And, we are not alone in Concord about not having adequate housing, particularly when we're trying to attract workers, and particularly workers in maybe a younger demographic, more entry-level professionals. And when you look at the average cost of a house in Concord, it's out of the realm of reality
Certainly,
for those folks. So what types of solutions do you think we should be looking at? And collectively because this is an issue of high priority of the chamber, and I know it is of the city as well. What types of issues should we be looking at that might help address this problem?
And you talk about young professionals. I was a young professional in Concord, 20 years ago. Maybe I'm still a young professional. I don't know, 45.
It depends how you, 40 is like the rough cutoff. But, there are a lot of people that sneak by that. So you could still pass.
But, 20 years ago, I was looking for an apartment, had my first job, had a friend who was looking for an apartment with me. And it took us months to find a place to live.
And how long ago was that?
This was 20 years ago. This was, around 2003, we'll say, that this was occurring. And it took us months to find a place because we had hadn't built any credit yet. We were young. We just had new jobs. So it was hard for us to find a job, find an apartment then. It's only gotten worse to today, where people can't find housing. Whether they have good credit, bad credit, doesn't matter. You're waiting 8 months. So I agree with you. Housing is at a crisis level in New Hampshire, or in Concord. And I think one of the things that we can look at is helping to look at streamlining permitting so it doesn't take so long to get the permit for a new construction or whatever variance you might need. If we can streamline that process, the cost of doing it will reduce, because instead of waiting a year, maybe
time is money.
Exactly, correct. We can also look at some different programs to make sure that they're not cumbersome to get through, like the RSA 79E Community Tax Relief Program. If we can look at that, where the application process that gets approved by the City Council, maybe if it doesn't take as long, that'll be more attractive to people to do things. And then also, when we're looking at projects, I've gone to a lot of listening events. I've seen, Earl Pierce put one out in Ward 2, and it seems a lot of the times when we're looking at new housing initiatives, we say, okay, and I'm just making up a number here, we can have 100 units, and then it's like, okay, well, maybe 80 units makes more sense. Well, those 20 units, those are 20 people that are not able to get a house. It's not just 20 mythical things. We're at such a crisis that people need housing, that if we don't get those 20 units, that's somebody who is in a relationship, an abusive relationship, that's looking to get out of their situation, looks to go to a shelter. The shelter has an 8-month wait to get them into an apartment, so they say, maybe I don't want to do that. And so they stay in the bad situation that they're in because they can't leave because of their job and they can't find a place to live. So we really, those 20 houses that we're looking at, 100 to 80, that makes a big difference.
Well, that sort of is a good segue to next question that deals with homelessness, an issue that is not unique to Concord, but certainly an issue that has gotten more and more challenging over the past several years. We have some good organizations in the community that have been working to address these issues. Concepts like Housing First and other initiatives. We've been building units, but we cannot seem to make a real dent in the homelessness issue in Concord because of the growth of it. It's outpacing anything that we do that we're currently doing to address it. Do you have thoughts on this and ways that the community could better address this issue?
Sure. So as I mentioned, I'm on the board of directors at Concord Coalition to End Homelessness. So this is something that I talk about, every day. For us, we see Housing First as a really important step to getting people housed. If you're out on the streets and you're chronically homeless, you generally are going to have mental health or substance use or disorders, and in order to you can't really get the counseling that you need if you're on the street. You need to have a house. So that's why it's Housing First. In order to get them the help that they need, we need to get them into a house. In Concord, we're at a 0.3% vacancy rate. 0.3 is is horrific. In order to be in a situation where we're anywhere healthy, it needs to be at least 5, and depending on which expert you believe or you want to say, it can be as high as 10%, that they say a vacancy rate should be between 5 and 10% to be healthy, so that people can move around from apartments. That means that today we're between 1,000 and 5,000 units short of where we need to be.
4 or 5% would feel like a glut at this point.
Exactly. And what happens is exactly what you were talking about before, which is houses that cost $200,000 right before the pandemic are now selling for $600,000. That is a massive increase in what your monthly mortgage is going to be. So then you can't afford to do that. So professionals are not going to come here to live because their mortgage, instead of being $2,000 a month, is $6,000 a month. I think we also need to look at making sure that we have more housing, because we're not going to be able to retain quality workers. We're not going to be able to have quality workers come in. We have the police department that has 19 open positions. I know 9 of them are probably going to be filled shortly with new cadets, but that's still 10 short. It's hard to hire for those positions if you're saying you're going to have to pay $6,000 a month for a mortgage, or you have to pay $2,000 for rent, but you have to wait 8 months before you can get a place. That's not a good way to attract people to live here. I think we also need to look at the steering committee for Concord's plan to end homelessness, see how we can get all the agencies together, working together more diligently to get this housing crisis solved. Currently at the coalition, the past few years, we house about 20 chronically homeless individuals every year. This year, we're just shy of 50. If I round up, we're at 50, but we'll be about that for housing this year, depending on how you're looking at the numbers, right? It's between 100 and 200 chronically homeless people in our city.
So that number is net of the people that are not necessarily chronic.
Yeah, well, you can have people, the 50 that I'm talking about, that's chronically homeless.
That's chronic.
Chronically homeless.
Because the numbers I'm hearing are kind of, they're not consistent, and they never really have been. When we say, what is the number? How do we get our arms around it? And depending on who you ask, you may get a different answer.
And that's another thing that the coalition has been working on, right? Because we need a list. Data is important, right? I'm an accountant, I'm an auditor, a Baldrige certified examiner. Data is how you can measure. If you can't measure it, you can't solve it. So that's one of the issues, is making sure we have everybody in the system saying, here's who's homeless, this is their situation, this is how we can get them housed, what is the process to get them to that next step. This is, they might be a veteran or other scenarios that we can look at to help them get housed through that, but that list is an important piece.
Well, we'll keep on moving down and talk about our next question, something near and dear to my heart, around tourism. And we live in a state where tourism is the second largest industry, but not so much in communities like Concord. We're a state capital. We don't have mountains, beaches, or lakes. We have a river. We've got history. And we have a lot of people coming into the state to spend money visiting us. So do you think that the city should have more of a role in terms of promoting tourism and going after that industry? Do you think that's an important part of our economic makeup?
Certainly, I do. I think having a tourism committee, maybe chaired by you, to help us, no?
It is near and dear to my heart, for sure.
But I think Concord does have a lot of stuff that we could attract people to come for tourism. We have a lot of art and culture in Concord, be it the Eddy, Capitol Center for the Arts, Bank Stage, Kimball Jenkins, Red River Theater. It's the best independent theater in the state. We have a ton of art that people can come see. The great thing about art tourism is the studies show that the people who are coming for art spend more money and they stay longer. They'll spend 40% more per day when they're visiting, and they'll also stay 20% longer. So for that one person who's deciding to go on a vacation, they'll be spending more money and they'll be staying longer. So that's a great opportunity for Concord.
One last question.
Sure.
We have a lot of traffic coming up on I-93. And from my perspective, looking as I drive by Concord, I'm not really flattered by what I see there. Do you agree with that statement? And if so, what would you consider should be done to help improve Concord's image from I-93?
I would agree mostly. I think that in combination with like a tourism committee would be great. I think some of our sign restrictions that we have for code enforcement are a little bit too aggressive. We might be able to relax those a little bit so that signs are a little bit better without turning us into Las Vegas Strip. I think that we can also look at having Concord look scenic and attract more tourism for things like the scenic rail riders and being a spot to start the bike trails for all the greenway trails that we have going on.
Lots of opportunity for improvement there.
Exactly.
Rob, thank you so much for joining us.
you,
I
Tim.
appreciate it.
All right, thank you.